the quiet corridors of St. Mary's Hospital, where the scent of antiseptic mingles with hope and despair, everyone knew Sarah Martinez as the gentle nurse who could calm any patient with her warm smile and steady hands.
For 3 years, she had walked those halls in soft-soled shoes, her stethoscope draped around her neck like a badge of compassion. Patients trusted her, colleagues respected her, and supervisors praised her dedication to healing. But what they didn't know was that every evening, when Sarah hung up her scrubs and drove to the other side of town, she transformed into someone entirely different. In a dimly lit gymnasium, where the sound of bouncing basketballs echoed like thunder, she became a force of nature with a basketball in her hands. Her shots were so precise, so impossibly accurate that even seasoned players stopped mid-game just to watch her play. The two worlds Sarah lived in seemed destined never to meet. Until one ordinary Tuesday when a medical emergency at a charity basketball game would force her to choose between the healing hands everyone knew and the shooting skills no one suspected. In that moment, with cameras rolling and hundreds of people watching, Sarah Martinez was about to shatter every assumption about who she was and what she was capable of. This is the story of how a nurse's secret talent not only saved a life but changed the entire landscape of women's basketball forever. It's about the power of hidden dreams, the courage to step into the spotlight, and the extraordinary things that happen when we dare to show the world who we really are. Sarah Martinez had perfected the art of living two completely different lives, and nobody suspected a thing.
Every morning at 6:30, she would slip into her navy blue scrubs, pin her long black hair into a neat bun, and drive through the awakening streets of Phoenix to St. Mary's Hospital.
By 7 o'clock, she was checking patient charts, adjusting IV drips, and offering reassuring smiles to worried families in the cardiac unit. Her colleagues saw her as the reliable one, the nurse who never missed a shift, never complained about overtime, and somehow always knew exactly what to say to make a frightened patient feel safe.
"Sarah's got magic hands," Dr. Reynolds often told new residents.
If you want to learn how to truly care for patients, watch her work. What Dr. Reynolds and everyone else at the hospital didn't know was that those same hands possessed an entirely different kind of magic. Every evening, when Sarah changed out of her scrubs and drove across town, she became someone the medical world would never recognize. The Sunset Community Center sat in a neighborhood that most of Sarah's colleagues would consider rough. The building was old, with peeling paint and a parking lot full of potholes. But inside, the gymnasium gleamed under bright fluorescent lights. This was where Sarah's secret life unfolded, where she transformed from a gentle healer into something altogether more fierce and focused.
She had discovered basketball almost by accident 3 years earlier, when she first moved to Phoenix after graduating nursing school. Sarah had been desperately lonely.
The demanding schedule at the hospital left little time for making friends, and her small apartment felt more like a prison than a home. One evening, walking past the community center, she heard the familiar sound of sneakers squeaking against hardwood and the rhythmic bounce of basketballs.
Growing up in a small town in New Mexico, Sarah had been the star player on her high school team. She remembered the feeling of the ball leaving her fingertips, the perfect arc through the air, the satisfying swish as it dropped through the net.
But when college came, her parents had insisted she pursue something practical, something stable. Nursing school didn't leave time for basketball, and by the time she graduated, Sarah had convinced herself that chapter of her life was over. But that evening at the community center, something awakened inside her.
She watched through the window as a group of women played pickup games, their movements fluid and confident, their laughter echoing through the gym. Before she could talk herself out of it, Sarah found herself walking through the front door.
"You looking to play?" asked a tall woman with graying hair and kind eyes. Her name was Coach Williams, though she insisted everyone just call her Coach. She had played professionally in Europe decades ago and now ran informal training sessions for anyone serious about improving their game.
Sarah hesitated.
She was wearing jeans and sneakers that had seen better days.
"I haven't played in years," she admitted. Coach Williams smiled. "Muscle memory is a beautiful thing. Grab those basketballs over there and show me what you remember." What happened next surprised everyone in the gym, including Sarah herself. The moment her fingers wrapped around the basketball, something clicked into place. Her body remembered movements she thought she'd forgotten. The ball felt like an extension of her arm as she dribbled, the rhythm coming back as naturally as breathing. But it was when she started shooting that the real magic happened. Standing at the free throw line, Sarah bent her knees, focused on the back of the rim, and released the ball in a perfect arc. Swish. Again. Swish. She moved around the court, shooting from different angles, different distances. Each shot found its mark with an accuracy that made the other players stop their own games to watch.
"Holy hell," whispered one of the women.
Where did you learn to shoot like that? Sarah couldn't explain it. She had always been a good shooter in high school, but this was different. It was as if all those years of precise movements in the hospital, the steady hands required for inserting IVs and administering medications, had somehow translated into an even more refined touch on the basketball court. From that night forward, Sarah lived a double life. At the hospital, she was the compassionate nurse who worked extra shifts and never said no when someone needed help. But every Tuesday and Thursday evening and all day Saturday, she belonged to the gym. She joined Coach Williams' informal team, a group of women ranging in age from 18 to 45, who took their basketball seriously even though none of them played professionally. The team became Sarah's sanctuary. There was Maria, a single mother who worked double shifts at a restaurant but never missed practice. Janet was a high school teacher who used basketball as her stress relief.
Keisha was a college student studying engineering, saving money for her final year of school. They were all different backgrounds, different ages, different life circumstances, but on the court, they moved as one unit.
Coach Williams quickly recognized Sarah's exceptional talent. "I've coached for 30 years, she told her one evening after practice. "I've seen players with better athleticism, better height, better speed, but I've never seen anyone with your shooting touch. It's like you were born with GPS in your fingertips." Sarah's accuracy from three-point range was legendary within their small circle. During practice scrimmages, she rarely missed. In games against other community center teams, opposing coaches would specifically design their defense around stopping her. But Sarah had learned to be more than just a shooter. Her nursing background had taught her to read situations quickly, to anticipate what was needed before anyone asked. On the basketball court, this translated into an uncanny ability to read defenses, to know exactly when to pass and when to take the shot herself. The team started winning games they had no business winning. Their reputation spread throughout the Phoenix amateur basketball community. Other teams would show up expecting an easy victory against the community center squad and leave shaking their heads after losing by 20 points, wondering how a team with no official coach and no real funding could play with such precision. But Sarah's two worlds remained completely separate. Her hospital colleagues had no idea she played basketball, and her teammates knew only that she worked in healthcare. She never mentioned specific details about either life to the other group. It wasn't intentional deception, but rather a way of keeping things simple. At the hospital, she could focus completely on healing. At the gym, she could lose herself in the pure joy of competition. The balancing act wasn't always easy. There were evenings when Sarah would finish a 12-hour shift at the hospital, emotionally drained from losing a patient or dealing with a particularly difficult case, and she would have to summon the energy to drive across town for practice. But somehow, the physical exertion of basketball helped her process the emotional weight of her nursing duties. The concentration required to perfect her shooting form cleared her mind of everything else. Her teammates noticed that Sarah played with an unusual calmness under pressure. While others might get rattled by aggressive defense or trash talk from opponents, Sarah remained steady. She had learned from years of medical emergencies that panic served no purpose, that clear thinking and steady hands were what saved lives. These same qualities made her nearly impossible to rattle on the basketball court. The community center games attracted small but enthusiastic crowds. Regular fans started showing up specifically to watch Sarah play. Children would arrive early to watch her warm-up routine, amazed by the way she could sink shot after shot from impossible distances. Some of the older fans started calling her the surgeon because of her precision, though they had no idea how accurate that nickname was in a completely different context. Sarah's life fell into a comfortable rhythm. She excelled at both her profession and her passion, though only she knew the full scope of what she was achieving. At the hospital, she was promoted to senior nurse in the cardiac unit, given responsibilities that reflected her colleagues' trust in her judgment and skills. On the basketball court, she continued to improve, her shooting percentage climbing even higher as she refined her technique through countless hours of practice. But this careful balance between her two worlds was about to be disrupted in a way Sarah could never have imagined. The separation she had maintained so carefully was about to crumble, and when it did, it would change not just her own life, but the lives of everyone who had underestimated what a nurse could accomplish when she stepped outside the boundaries others had set for her. The first crack in the wall between Sarah's two lives came on a Tuesday evening in March, when Coach Williams approached her after practice with an unusual proposal. "There's a charity game next month," Coach explained, toweling off sweat as the gym began to empty. "It's a big event, raises money for the children's hospital. They want our team to play against some former college players, make it interesting for the crowd. But Sarah, this isn't like our usual games. There will be media coverage, probably a couple hundred people in the audience." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The idea of playing in front of a large crowd, with cameras recording, made her nervous in a way that performing surgery never did. In the operating room, she was anonymous behind a mask, focused solely on the task at hand. On a basketball court with media attention, there would be nowhere to hide. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "That's not really what I'm comfortable with." Coach Williams studied her carefully. In 3 years, she had never seen Sarah back down from any challenge on the court. "What are you worried about? You're the best shooter I've ever coached. This is a chance to really showcase what our team can do." But Sarah was thinking about the complications. What if someone from the hospital saw her on the news? What if her colleagues discovered her secret life? She had worked hard to maintain her professional image as the serious, dedicated nurse. Would they take her less seriously if they knew she spent her free time playing basketball? More than that, Sarah was worried about the pressure. The community center games were one thing, but a charity event with media coverage and a large crowd was entirely different. What if she choked? What if all those years of perfect shooting suddenly deserted her when it mattered most? "Let me think about it," Sarah told Coach Williams. But even as she said it, she knew she was going to find an excuse to avoid the game. As she drove home that evening, Sarah found herself at a crossroads she hadn't expected to face. For 3 years, she had been content to live her double life, excelling in both worlds while keeping them completely separate. But now, circumstances were pushing her toward a decision that would force those worlds to collide. She had no way of knowing that this charity game would become the catalyst for the most important moment of her life, or that her decision to step into the spotlight would reveal not just her hidden talents, but her true character in ways she never could have imagined. Sarah had made her decision. She would skip the charity game. For 2 weeks after Coach Williams first mentioned it, Sarah rehearsed her excuse. She would tell the team she had to work that evening, which wouldn't be entirely false since she often picked up extra shifts. It was safer that way, easier to maintain the careful separation between her two lives that had served her so well. But fate, it seemed, had different plans. The call came on a Thursday morning while Sarah was reviewing patient charts in the cardiac unit. Dr. Reynolds approached her with an expression she recognized immediately from their years working together. It was the look he wore when he needed to ask for a favor he wasn't sure she would grant. "Sarah, I hate to ask this, but we've got a situation," he began. "You know the charity basketball game next week? The one that raises money for our pediatric wing?" Sarah's blood ran cold. Of course the hospital was involved with the charity game. How had she not made that connection? "The medical team we're supposed to have on standby just had an emergency come up," Dr. Reynolds continued. "Their lead nurse got called away for a family crisis. I know it's short notice, but would you be willing to cover?" "It's just a precautionary measure, really. These events rarely need serious medical intervention." Sarah stared at him, her mind racing. The charity game she had been planning to avoid was the same event where her hospital needed medical staff. The irony was almost overwhelming. She started, then stopped. How could she explain that she couldn't work the medical station because she was supposed to be playing in the game? "When exactly is it?" 7 o'clock start time at the Phoenix Convention Center. Should be over by 9:30. Easy duty, really. Just be there in case someone takes a hard fall or needs basic first aid. Sarah felt the walls of her carefully constructed double life beginning to crumble. She could refuse the medical assignment, but Dr. Reynolds would want to know why, and she couldn't think of a reasonable excuse. She could skip playing in the game, but that would mean letting down Coach Williams and the team that had become like family to her. "Okay," she heard herself saying. "I'll cover the medical station." "Doctor." Reynolds smiled with relief. "Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. I knew I could count on you." As he walked away, Sarah slumped against the nurse's station counter. She would have to tell Coach Williams she couldn't play. There was no other choice. She couldn't be in 2 places at once, and her professional obligations had to take priority. That evening at practice, Sarah approached Coach Williams with a heavy heart. But before she could speak, the older woman grabbed her arm with excitement. "Sarah, I have incredible news about the charity game. Do you know which charity it's benefiting? The Children's Hospital. The same one where you work. Isn't that amazing? You'll be playing to raise money for your own patients." Sarah felt sick. "Coach, I need to tell you something." "Wait, there's more," Coach Williams continued, too excited to let Sarah interrupt.
"They've added a special challenge to the game."
At halftime, they're having a 3-point shooting contest. Winner gets a $1,000 bonus for the charity. "Sarah, with your shooting ability, we could win that money for sick kids." The weight of the situation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Not only was this game benefiting her own hospital,
but there was now a shooting contest that she could potentially win, generating significant money for the pediatric wing, where she had spent countless hours caring for children with serious heart conditions. But she was trapped by her commitment to work the medical station.
"Coach, I can't play," Sarah said finally. "I have to work that night." Coach Williams's face fell. "Work? But Sarah, this is exactly the kind of opportunity we've been building toward. The team needs you. Those kids need the money you could win." "I'm sorry. I just can't." Sarah left practice early that night, unable to face the disappointed looks from her teammates. She drove home feeling like she had failed everyone, but she couldn't see any other option. The following week passed in a blur of hospital duties and restless evenings. Sarah threw herself into her work, trying to distract herself from thoughts of the charity game. But everywhere she went in the hospital, she heard colleagues talking about the event. The entire pediatric wing was excited about the fundraising potential. Several doctors had bought tickets to attend. Friday evening, Sarah was working late when she overheard a conversation that made her heart sink even further. Two of the pediatric nurses were discussing the charity game with obvious disappointment. "I heard the community center team lost their best player," one of them was saying. "Some woman who apparently never misses from three-point range. Now they're saying the game won't be competitive at all. The college players are going to destroy them."
"That's too bad," replied the other nurse. "I was hoping for a good game. I bought tickets specifically because I heard this woman was something special." Sarah felt a stab of guilt so sharp it was almost physical.
She wasn't just letting down her basketball team. She was letting down the entire hospital community who had been looking forward to an exciting game. That night, Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She kept thinking about the children in the pediatric wing, many of whom she had cared for during her years at the hospital. She thought about the $1,000 bonus for the charity, money that could buy medical equipment or fund treatment for families who couldn't afford it.
But most of all, she thought about the conversation she had overheard. Her teammates were going to be humiliated, playing shorthanded against superior opponents, while hundreds of people watched. The team that had welcomed her, supported her, and become her second family was going to suffer because she had chosen the safe path. By morning, Sarah had made a decision that surprised even her.
She called Dr. Reynolds at home, something she had never done in 3 years of working with him. "Dr. Reynolds, I need to ask you something unusual," she began. "The medical coverage for the charity game tomorrow night. Is it absolutely essential that I be stationed at the medical table the entire time?" There was a pause. "Well, ideally yes, but Sarah, if you're having second thoughts about volunteering, I can probably find someone else." "No, that's not it," Sarah said quickly. "I'll be there. I'll provide full medical coverage. But would it be possible for me to be more mobile, maybe circulate through the crowd instead of being stationary?" Dr. Reynolds sounded puzzled but accommodating. "I suppose that would be fine as long as you're clearly identified as medical personnel and you stay alert for any problems. May I ask why?" "Why?" Sarah took a deep breath. "There's something I need to do during that game, Dr. Reynolds. Something that might help raise even more money for the charity." She didn't elaborate, and to his credit, Dr. Reynolds didn't press for details. "All right, Sarah, I trust your judgment. Just make sure patient safety comes first." "Always," Sarah replied. And she meant it. Saturday evening arrived with surprising speed. Sarah stood in the parking lot of the Phoenix Convention Center, holding a duffel bag containing her basketball gear and wearing her medical identification badge over street clothes. Her heart was pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. She had called Coach Williams that morning to explain that she might be able to play after all, but she hadn't revealed the full complexity of her situation. She simply said she had found a way to manage her work obligations. Inside the convention center, the basketball court was set up in the middle of a large exhibition hall. Portable bleachers surrounded the playing area, and Sarah was amazed to see that nearly every seat was filled. This was far larger than any crowd she had ever played in front of. The college team was warming up on one end of the court, and Sarah could immediately see why everyone expected them to win easily. They were taller, more athletic, and moved with the polished confidence of players who had competed at high levels. Their warm-up shots were falling consistently, their passes crisp and precise. On the other end, Sarah's community center teammates looked nervous. Without her, they would be playing 6 players against the college team's 8, and the skill gap would be enormous. Coach Williams was trying to keep them positive, but Sarah could see the worry in her eyes. Sarah made her way to the medical station first, checking in with the event organizers and confirming the emergency procedures. She positioned her duffel bag behind the medical table where she could access it quickly if needed.
The plan she had formulated was risky, but it was the only way she could think of to fulfill both her obligations.
At 6:30, the teams were introduced to the crowd. Sarah watched from the sidelines as her teammates were announced, noting the polite but unenthusiastic applause. When the college team was introduced, the crowd responded with much more energy, clearly expecting them to provide the evening's entertainment. Sarah found Coach Williams during the final warm-up period.
"Coach, I'm here," she said quietly. Coach Williams spun around, her face lighting up with relief and joy.
"Sarah, I can't believe you made it. But how?" "I'll explain later," Sarah said. "Right now, I need to know if you still want me to play." "Sarah, you're our only hope of making this competitive." Sarah nodded toward the medical station. "I have to check in there periodically, but I think I can manage both responsibilities."
"Are you okay with that?" Coach Williams looked confused but didn't question further. "Whatever you need to do, just do it. We need you on that court." The game began at 7 o'clock sharp, and Sarah's worst fears were immediately realized. Playing without her, the community center team was completely overmatched.
The college players were bigger, faster, and more skilled. By the end of the first quarter, they led 22-8, and the gap was widening with each possession.
Sarah stood at the medical station watching her teammates struggle, feeling sick to her stomach. Several people in the crowd were already getting up to leave, clearly disappointed by the one-sided nature of the game.
This wasn't the competitive, entertaining event that had been promised. During the timeout between the first and second quarters, one of the college players went down hard after a collision under the basket.
Sarah immediately jogged onto the court in her medical capacity, kneeling beside the player to assess the injury.
It was a minor ankle sprain, nothing serious, but as she helped the player to his feet, Sarah heard murmurs from the crowd. "Who's the medical person? She looks young to be a doctor." "I think she's a nurse from the hospital." As Sarah walked the injured player to the bench, she made eye contact with several people in the crowd. Some of them looked familiar, and with a start she realized why. They were colleagues from the hospital, people she worked with every day, and they were staring at her with curious expressions.
Dr. Reynolds was sitting in the third row, and when he saw her, he waved.
"Great job, Sarah," he called out. Sarah's cover was officially blown. Her hospital colleagues now knew she was here, working the game in a medical capacity. But they didn't yet know about her other role, the one that was becoming more urgent with each passing minute as her teammates fell further behind. By halftime, the score was 45-19. The college team was showing mercy, clearly coasting and running basic plays rather than trying to run up the score. But even their restrained effort was more than enough to dominate the game. As the teams headed to their locker rooms for halftime, the public address announcer called for participants in the three-point shooting contest. Sarah's moment of truth had arrived. She looked toward the medical station, where her supervisor would expect her to remain. Then she looked toward her teammates, who were walking off the court with their heads down, clearly embarrassed by their performance. Finally, she looked up at the crowd, many of whom were her hospital colleagues, people whose respect and trust she had spent 3 years earning. In that moment, Sarah Martinez made the decision that would change everything. She reached for her duffel bag, pulled out her basketball shoes, and began changing out of her street clothes right there on the sidelines. It was time for her two worlds to become one, regardless of the consequences. Sarah's hands moved with the same steady precision she used when starting an IV. As she laced up her basketball shoes on the sidelines of the Phoenix Convention Center court, around her the noise of the crowd during halftime seemed to fade into background static as she focused on the task ahead. Reynolds was the first to notice what she was doing. From his seat in the third row, she could see his confused expression as he watched his reliable cardiac nurse transform into something he had never seen before. Other hospital colleagues began pointing and whispering, their faces showing mixtures of surprise and curiosity. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the arena, "it's time for our halftime three-point shooting contest. The winner will earn a $1,000 bonus donation to Phoenix Children's Hospital." Sarah pulled her long black hair into the same tight ponytail she wore during surgery, a gesture that had become automatic whenever she needed absolute focus. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her as she stood up. No longer the anonymous medical personnel in street clothes, but clearly dressed to play basketball. Coach Williams appeared at her side, her face showing equal parts amazement and concern. "Sarah, what are you doing? I thought you said you had work obligations." "I do," Sarah replied, pulling on her team jersey over her medical identification badge. "But sometimes work means doing what's most important, not just what's expected." The shooting contest format was simple. 5 participants would each attempt 10 shots from various spots around the three-point line. Highest percentage wins the money for charity. Sarah looked at her competition as they gathered at center court. 3 college players who had been lighting up the scoreboard all evening, a local radio personality who apparently had played Division II basketball, and Sarah herself. The crowd grew quiet as the contest participants were introduced. The college players received enthusiastic applause, their shooting abilities already demonstrated during the game. The radio personality got a warm reception from listeners who recognized his voice. When Sarah's name was called, there was a moment of confused silence. "This is Sarah Martinez, representing the Phoenix Community Center team and serving as tonight's medical coordinator," the announcer said, clearly reading from notes that hadn't anticipated this dual role. The applause was polite but puzzled. Most of the crowd had no idea what to expect from the hospital nurse, who had appeared seemingly from nowhere to enter their shooting contest. Sarah's teammates from the community center were gathered near their bench, their faces showing amazement at her sudden appearance. During halftime, they had been discussing their poor first-half performance and trying to figure out how to make the second half more competitive. None of them had expected their missing star player to literally materialize on the court. The first college player stepped up to shoot.
He was tall and athletic, with the fluid motion of someone who had been shooting basketballs since childhood. His first 3 shots dropped cleanly through the net, drawing cheers from the crowd.
His rhythm was smooth, his form textbook perfect. He finished with 7 successful shots out of 10 attempts, a 70% success rate that drew appreciative applause. The second college player matched the first, also making 7 out of 10. The third college player, clearly the best shooter on their team, made 8 out of 10, his shots barely touching the rim as they fell through the net. The crowd was getting excited, sensing they were watching quality basketball even in this informal contest. The radio personality stepped up next, and while his form wasn't as polished as the college players, he had clearly spent time practicing for this moment. He made 6 out of 10, a respectable showing that earned him good-natured cheers from his radio audience in attendance. Then it was Sarah's turn. She walked to the three-point line with the same calm demeanor she brought to medical emergencies. The crowd grew quieter, curious about this unexpected contestant who moved with surprising confidence despite her obvious amateur status compared to the college athletes. Sarah bent down and picked up the basketball, feeling its familiar weight in her hands. The leather surface was slightly worn, exactly the type of ball she had been practicing with for 3 years at the community center. She dribbled it twice, a ritual that helped her connect with the rhythm she would need. From her position behind the three-point line, Sarah could see her hospital colleagues in the crowd. Dr. Kushkin Kling, Reynolds was leaning forward in his seat, clearly fascinated by this hidden side of his colleague that he had never suspected. She could see nurses from her unit, respiratory therapists she worked with daily, and even hospital administrators who had come to support the charity event. More importantly, she could see children from the pediatric wing who had been given special permission to attend the game. These were kids she had cared for, children whose IVs she had started with gentle hands, whose fears she had calmed with reassuring words. They were watching her with wide eyes, not understanding the medical connection, but sensing that something important was happening. Sarah's first shot arced through the air with perfect rotation. The ball seemed to hang in space for a moment before dropping cleanly through the center of the rim without touching anything but net. The crowd murmured appreciatively. But this was just one shot, nothing that couldn't be attributed to luck. Her second shot followed the same trajectory, swish. Then her third, swish. By her fourth consecutive success, the crowd was beginning to pay serious attention. By her sixth, people were standing up to get a better view. Sarah's shooting motion was unlike anything the college players had demonstrated. Where theirs had been powerful and athletic, hers was economical and precise. Every movement served a purpose, no energy was wasted. Her follow-through was identical on every attempt, her release point exactly the same. It was the shooting form of someone who had spent countless hours perfecting every tiny detail. Shot 7. Swish. Shot 8. Swish. The crowd was now completely focused on Sarah, sensing they were witnessing something special. The college players on the bench were watching with the professional appreciation of athletes recognizing superior skill. Shot 9 dropped through the net so softly it barely moved the cords. The crowd erupted in amazement. Sarah had made 9 consecutive three-point shots, a display of accuracy that would have been impressive in an empty gym, let alone in front of hundreds of people under pressure. For her final shot, Sarah paused for just a moment. She looked up at the crowd, making eye contact with Dr. Reynolds, then with her teammates, then with the children from the pediatric wing. She thought about all the hours she had spent in both worlds, caring for patients and perfecting her shooting.
never imagining that these two passions would converge in such a public moment. She released her 10th shot with the same smooth motion she had used for the previous 9.
The ball traced a perfect arc through the air, and when it dropped through the net without touching the rim, the crowd exploded in sustained applause that echoed through the convention center. 10 for 10. Perfect. Sarah had not just won the shooting contest. She had delivered a performance that would be talked about for years. The $1,000 for charity was now guaranteed. But more than that, she had announced herself as a basketball player of extraordinary ability. As the crowd continued to cheer, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder.
It was Dr. Reynolds, who had left his seat and walked onto the court.
"Sarah," he said, shaking his head in amazement, "in 3 years of working with you, I had no idea you could do anything like this." "There's a lot we don't know about each other outside of work," Sarah replied, surprised by how calm she felt despite the momentous nature of what had just happened. But the evening was far from over. The second half of the actual game still needed to be played, and Sarah's team was still down by 26 points. The shooting contest had been impressive, but it was individual achievement. The question now was whether Sarah could translate that personal success into team performance. Coach Williams approached her as the teams prepared to return to the court. "Sarah, I don't know what just happened here, but our team needs you for the second half. Can you play?" Sarah looked toward the medical station where she was supposed to be monitoring for injuries.
Then she looked at her teammates who were staring at her with expressions of hope and disbelief. Finally, she looked up at the crowd, which was now buzzing with excitement about the possibility of a competitive second half.
Yes,
She said simply.
I can play.
The transformation in the game was immediate and dramatic.
Sarah entered the second half as a starter, and from her first touch of the basketball it was clear that something special was happening. The college team, which had been coasting through an easy victory, suddenly found themselves facing a player who could not be stopped.
Sarah's first shot of the second half came from three-point range, a quick release that the defense had no chance to contest. Swish. Her second shot came after a steal, a fast break opportunity that she finished with the same casual accuracy she had displayed during the contest. Her third shot was from even deeper range, well beyond the three-point line. A shot that drew gasps from the crowd as it fell perfectly through the net.
The college team called timeout, clearly rattled by this sudden change in the game's dynamic. During the break, Sarah could see them pointing at her and adjusting their defensive strategy. They had gone from treating this as a casual exhibition to recognizing they were facing a serious challenge. But adjusting their defense proved futile.
Sarah wasn't just a shooter. Her 3 years of community center basketball had taught her how to play within a team structure. When the college team sent 2 defenders to guard her, she found open teammates with precise passes.
But they backed off to respect her range. She drove to the basket with surprising quickness. More impressively, Sarah's shooting seemed to elevate her entire team's performance.
Her community-centered teammates who had been intimidated and overwhelmed in the first half began playing with confidence and energy. They started making their own shots, grabbing rebounds and playing defense with intensity they hadn't shown earlier. The crowd, which had been preparing to leave during the lopsided first half, was now completely engaged. They cheered every Sarah shot, gasped at her impossible makes from deep range, and began chanting her name when she came up with steals or assists. With 10 minutes left in the game, Sarah's team had cut the deficit to 12 points. With 5 minutes left, it was down to 6. The college players, who had expected an easy exhibition game, were now playing with the intensity of a championship contest, clearly shaken by how quickly their comfortable lead had evaporated. Dr. Reynolds and the other hospital staff in attendance were witnessing something none of them could have imagined.
The quiet, reliable nurse they knew from work was dominating a basketball game against college-level competition, displaying skills that seemed to belong to a completely different person. But it was with 2 minutes left in the game that Sarah produced the moment that would be remembered forever. Her team had tied the score at 68, a comeback that seemed impossible just 20 minutes earlier. The college team had the ball, trying to regain their composure and re-establish control of the game. That's when disaster struck. During a scramble for a loose ball near the college team's bench, one of their players collided hard with the scorer's table. The impact was violent, and the player immediately grabbed his chest, his face contorting in pain as he struggled to breathe. Sarah recognized the signs immediately. This wasn't a typical basketball injury. The player was showing symptoms of what appeared to be a cardiac episode, possibly triggered by the physical exertion and stress of the game. Without hesitation, she abandoned her position on the basketball court and sprinted toward the injured player. The crowd fell silent as they watched Sarah kneel beside the young man, her medical training taking over completely. She checked his pulse, assessed his breathing, and began asking him questions in the calm, professional voice her patients knew so well.
Can you hear me? I need you to try to stay calm. My name is Sarah. I'm a nurse, and I'm going to take care of you.
The player was conscious but clearly in distress. Sarah's assessment indicated he was experiencing what appeared to be an exercise-induced cardiac arrhythmia, a serious condition that required immediate medical attention. She called for the emergency medical kit that was stationed courtside and began administering care while simultaneously calling for paramedics. For the next 15 minutes, while the crowd watched in tense silence, Sarah worked with the calm efficiency that had made her one of the most respected nurses at her hospital. She monitored the player's vital signs, administered oxygen, and provided the steady care that kept him stable until paramedics arrived to transport him to the emergency room. As the ambulance pulled away, its lights flashing through the convention center windows, Sarah found herself standing alone at center court. Her jersey was wrinkled, her ponytail had come loose during the medical emergency, and she was emotionally drained from the intensity of providing critical care under such circumstances. But around her, something extraordinary was happening. The crowd, which had been silent during the medical emergency, began to applaud. It started slowly, just a few people clapping, but it built steadily until the entire convention center was filled with sustained, thunderous applause. They weren't just applauding her basketball performance, impressive as it had been. They were recognizing something deeper, the character it took to abandon a tied game in its final minutes to provide medical care to an opponent.
They had witnessed someone who excelled at two completely different disciplines, but who understood that some things were more important than winning.
Dr. Bode Reynolds was the first to reach her on the court. "Sarah," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "what you just did, that young man's life might have been in danger. Your quick response, your medical skills. I've never been more proud to work with someone." Coach Williams was next, wrapping Sarah in a hug that conveyed 3 years of friendship and respect. "You left a tied game to help someone who was trying to beat us," she said. "That's not just good basketball, Sarah. That's good character." The game was officially suspended, its outcome irrelevant in the face of what had transpired. But the real victory had already been achieved. Sarah had won the shooting contest, generating $1,000 for charity. Her team had mounted an impossible comeback that thrilled the crowd. Most importantly, she had potentially saved a life by providing immediate medical care when it was needed most.
In the days that followed, word of Sarah's performance spread far beyond the Phoenix Convention Center. Social media posts about the nurse who dominated a basketball game and then left it to save a life went viral.
Sports websites picked up the story. Local news stations interviewed her teammates and hospital colleagues.
But for Sarah, the most meaningful response came from the pediatric wing of her hospital. The children she cared for had a new understanding of their nurse, seeing her not just as a medical professional, but as someone with extraordinary talents who had used them to help their hospital.
The college player made a full recovery, and when he was discharged from the hospital, he sought out Sarah to thank her personally.
"You didn't just save my life," he told her.
"You showed me what it means to have your priorities in the right place."
Sarah's double life had ended that evening at the convention center, but it had been replaced by something better, a single life lived authentically, where her healing hands and her shooting skills were both recognized as parts of the same remarkable person. 6 months later, Sarah was invited to try out for a professional women's basketball league that had heard about her story.
But by then, she had found the perfect balance. She continued working as a nurse, providing the care that had always been her calling.
But she also became an ambassador for the hospital's athletic program, using her basketball skills to raise money for charity and inspire young patients who needed hope. The shot that won the contest had been perfect, but it wasn't the most important moment of that evening.
The real victory had come when Sarah chose to be both the healer and the athlete, the nurse and the basketball player, showing everyone that we don't have to choose between our passions when we have the courage to pursue them all.